Keeping the heat on, creating an environment of hate and anger even when none need exist. A great example is when on Mehdi Hasan's outing on Surrounded, someone came on saying that London had become something of a wasteland. Made me think of something out of Mad Max, that violence was rife, there was no rule of law, and he was simply regurgitating the lies of the right wing as he'd read about it in his online groups. When Mehdi Hasan asked him whether or not he'd ever been to London, the man said no. That is exactly the kind of thing that these groups do. The more people say it, the more they believe it. The more they make other people think it might be true. The haters and the angry ones lying out of their front teeth, because what do they care about the truth? The only truth that matters is the truth they want to accept, and if they can convince others, then that truth just became a little stronger. That is how to spread fascism and sow chaos, where chaos should be the only foreigner. So why is the media playing into this? Why do we not have any mainstream media that looks to set the record straight? Why is there nobody in the mainstream media who can combat this insane level of misinformation? The misinformation is deliberate. It is targeted. It feeds on our fears. It pushes us in directions where well-known people are voicing unproven rhetoric. They are exaggerating figures and over-embellishing data sets to mask the agenda that is striding arrogantly and falsely in the background. Esheru guides us through some of these topics and others, and I am grateful to him for doing so. This is Two and a Mic. Rise up and be curious.
Dung weche pek kod welo mabiro e Two and a Mic. Dung parodit kod jok mawuoye Two and a Mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji e Two and a Mic. Wala wachokre wabed piny bi wawinje ero chako moment ndi Two and a Mic podcast makende.
Joined again, thankfully, with my good friend Esheru. Esheru, how's it going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be here again. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so last year there were the Farage Riots? Is that correct to call it that way?
Yeah, well, I believe it's the best way to call it. Let's call it the Farage Riots, the racist riots. That's what they were. You know, the media tried to downplay it by calling it the summer riots and with concerned citizens. No. It was purely about racism. That's it. Farage Riots.
And ever since then, there has been this constant stream I've seen of patriots online talking absolute tosh about this, about that, and people on boats and immigration and so on. I kind of get the feeling that a lot of people were actually absent from class the day that teachers taught them the meaning of the word patriotism, because none of these people are patriots from my understanding of the word.
Well, let's remember, it's one of the stages of fascism, right, where rampant patriotism, and I say that with air quotes, rampant patriotism becomes one of the areas what people tend to want to focus on. And it's a lot about, waving flags, being proud about, the heritage of the country, despite all the lies being told about the country. It's about being proud of oneself and one's heritage, when there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you're denigrating groups of people and stepping on groups of people to try and put forward your own ideas of what your culture, what your heritage is, then it's wrong.
And it seems to be the case that there's a lot of work being put into making the atmosphere, the environment, the political atmosphere, the political environment ready for further, I suppose, attacks on democracy, further destabilization, further victimization of community groups. It's a very unsavory environment that's being created, politically speaking.
Absolutely. I think what we are witnessing is dog whistles, rather, being used by certain politicians and MPs, people like Rupert Lowe, people like Nigel Farage. Then you have the media talking heads, people like Andrew Pierce and Lawrence Fox and Stephen Yatsley Lennon, also known as Tommy Robinson, stoking the flames. What they'll do is, on social media, for example, they will search out articles and images from globally, not just here in Britain, but mostly Britain, but from global as well, of black and brown people committing crimes, as if to say black and brown people are a problem. And this is just constant, rehashing of the same thing. Look at these people, they're bad, they're evil, they're not like us who are peaceful and want love and unity and we want our country back. And then Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe would end up using words like, oh, this is a tinderbox ready to go off. It's a slow drip feed, and if you drip feed this into people's psyche on a daily basis, all it takes is one big thing to happen, that's it, people snap and come out. However, I just wanted to just add, what was interesting, last weekend, The Guardian released, it was Saturday, they released an article about the summer riots. And what they found was that 3 in every 5 of the people that were arrested for those riots were men who had been at one point or another in their lives reported to the police or convicted for spousal abuse and violent crimes. And it's interesting that The Guardian chose to release this at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, okay? So it would receive less scrutiny and wouldn't get the attention that it deserved. And of course, it then gets downplayed and we move on. And again, this is the media controlling the narrative, and it's actually quite disingenuous.
Yep. Some of what you say there reminds me of 2 specific situations. Whenever people talk about the Holocaust during the Second World War, there's always followed up by this principle, never again. What would you have done? And then you kind of move forward to today and you see, okay, there's a genocide going on in Gaza. It's being played out live on our television screens. People are not even allowed to protest against it. They're getting arrested. They're being bullied by the police and so on. The other thing which this reminds me of is I went to a museum exhibition earlier this year in Berlin. When people think about colonialism, when people think about the slave trade, the companies that were out there in these areas, in the different nations, different parts of Africa, for example, they were sending back images which were dehumanizing, which were deliberately set in a certain way as to fit a specific narrative. And history books, if you remember a few years ago, people talking about how history books need to be changed because they only ever point at people from Africa as being victims. They only ever talk about the perspective of the countries that went out there and started to push the slave trade and so on. They never talk about the perspective of African peoples and the perspective of the people who eventually became slaves. And what was great about this exhibition was it flipped it. It showed images of African people doing what they normally do in their normal social active lives. And the images that they created were so starkly different to all of the images which were being sent home at the time. And it just makes you think, now that's exactly what the far right is doing in the UK at the moment. It's the same book.
Tried and tested method. It's tried and tested, and it's the same. They're using the same playbook as before. It's just how it is. I think that it is about, let's call it what it is. It's white supremacy. That's it. That's it. It has nothing more than that. Let's remember that Europeans created racial classification theories. Then they socially engineered a racial hierarchy, placing themselves at the top, with varying degrees of brown in the middle, black at the bottom. And they have to keep massaging this lie in order for it to remain relevant. And as my dad always says, with a lie, you have to massage it every day for it to remain relevant. He says the truth only needs the light of day. And the way that the world has been created, this lie has to be massaged. And this is why there's this constant feed of black people and brown people doing negative things. But here in Britain, and there's a lot of memes flying around, certainly that I've posted, and one of the questions that we've been asking is, why is it the people on the right never seem to talk about the crimes committed by people that look like them? they're committing far more than people that look like me, but they never talk about the crimes that people that look like them are committing. And again, it doesn't feed into their narrative.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of the violence that I've seen, every community, every type of person, every social group, every social category, every gender, they all have certain elements within that will commit crime. There is no one nationality or type of person which is free of crime. If they were, they'd all be the judges and the police of the world. But such a people doesn't exist. But when I see violence in the UK, for example, or in the US, or in even Europe, in Berlin, in Paris, that I have seen, most of that violence is being committed against peaceful protesters, is being committed by extremist right-wingers. It's being committed by racist white Europeans. And so therefore, the question has to be asked, how can people continue to believe this when they can see the images on the news as well?
You get to a point where people, their minds switch off and they refuse to believe what their mind. It's the 1984 George Orwell. I think it's quite near the end of the book, where he says that the party told people to reject the evidence of their eyes and ears. It was a part of the final. I think it was a final command or something like that. But this is exactly what it is. People are being forced to reject the evidence of their eyes and ears. For example, here in Britain, there's a lot of talk around Pakistani grooming gangs, and they're talking about all these. Of course, they're only talking about young white girls being harassed and raped by Pakistani men. All the data from 5 Pillars, from the government's own website, from the Office of National Statistics, from the Centre for Expertise on Child Sexual Abuse, from the Centre for Expertise on Sexual Violence and Rape, an organisation called Violence Against Girls, Women and Girls. All the data will show the factual information that 8 out of 10 of those who are convicted every year for child sexual offences, for rape, for violence against women and girls are white men. That's all the data. I'm not telling you that. These are the organisations that I've just named out. People can feel free to check them. But if you look at the media, if we look at social media, if you look at the talking heads, you would not believe that's the case. You would not believe that's the case because they refuse to look at themselves, look at what white men are doing in society, because they need to prove a point that the problem is black and brown men or black and brown people. They need to prove this point, even when what they're trying to prove, you can show, like I said, data from 7 different organizations that are telling them exactly the opposite of what they're saying, but they refuse to believe it.
So the groundwork is being created for, I don't know what. Politicians can see it. They're not changing anything. Their rhetoric remains the same.
This is the thing that really bothers me. We live in a country where politicians are never held accountable for anything that they do, right? And I can see blatant lies on a daily basis being printed. Just this morning, I woke up and I think it says that, I think like Rupert Lowe wrote something like, London has something like on average 50 people a day are being stabbed. Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage said that this morning in the tweet. 50 people a day being stabbed. Could it be anything further from the truth? We don't have that level of knife crime in London. It's just not. We don't have it. Furthermore, when you run the numbers, which I did as well a couple of days ago, in terms of violent crimes around the country, London sits at number 10. Number 10 on the list. Number 10. It's not even in the top 5 for violent crimes. But the reason why they focus so much on London is 2 main reasons. Most of the black people live here, and we also have a Muslim mayor.
Yeah.
And they need to attack him. But they'll churn out all these, and there were no politicians who are countering it, saying this is dangerous, this is wrong, this is factually incorrect. Nobody's challenging it. We're challenging it.
And the thing which concerns me, in addition to all of these concerning issues, what are the politicians doing in the background while all of this is happening?
I believe we're watching organized chaos. Okay, this is organized. And the country right about now is being asset stripped. BlackRock has signed a deal with the government. Palantir has moved in very slowly. And I believe that the chaos that we're seeing, not just here, but also abroad in the US, parts of Europe, the chaos is organized because the damage that's being done to our countries by politicians allowing very wealthy donors to asset strip the nation, to literally strip it to the bare bones, needs to be hidden. So they need to divert our attentions elsewhere. They need us to be upset with each other. They need us to focus our anger on the person who lives next door to us, the person that will essentially give us a lift to the hospital if one of our children falls over. These are the people that they want us to hate.
Yeah. And the organizations like Amnesty, like Human Rights Watch, like Liberty are being labeled unpatriotic. They're being labeled as traitors because they are shedding light on all of these issues and others.
And this is it. It's almost like we're living in a parallel universe. Imagine an organization like these organizations. They do stellar work. They do good work. They're informing people of what's actually going on, but they're being domed enemies. I think it was United Nations, UNHCR, delivered 70,000 food parcels to children in Great Britain when the last government was in office. I believe Jacob Rees-Mogg had a position within, was it Boris Johnson's? When Jacob Rees-Mogg was in office, it might have been the last government under Sunak, it might have been just before Sunak. But the United Nations delivered 70,000 food parcels to children in Britain. And he said, it's not their concern. They should stay out of British domestic issues. And I started thinking, you're in government. You should be taking care of these people that are vulnerable. An outside organization has stepped in and you're upset about that. Do your job. But a country like Britain, the 7th richest economy in the world, it's no longer 5th. It's like number 7 is dropping. It prides itself on being this wealthy economy. I always say that you can't measure an economy by how many billionaires it has or its GDP. You've got to measure an economy or a country and how well it looks after its most vulnerable. Britain is low in the rankings, in my opinion.
Esheru, thank you very much for your analysis, brother. It's always interesting to get those unique perspectives on all of these issues. And what's happening in the UK is troubling. But I hope that people will actually wake up and start to reflect a bit more on the damage that they're doing.
Thank you very much for having me, and I really do hope so too. Thank you. Take care.
Two and a mic.